Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Heroes in Grief podcast, and glad you could join us today. And with us today, we're having a very special one with us. I always say us. I don't know. It's me and you, Kelly, are here. But, yeah, with us, I guess you listening too would be the thing. But I have Kelly Cormier, and she is a pet loss grief coach, and she's also a certified grief educator. We both graduated from that program too. And so I was really excited about having this show because I love my pets. For one thing, I love my dogs. I currently have none because we lost 2 this year. But I've always grown up with dogs, and I love dogs. And so very close to my pets, and I understand that. And, you know, the whole grief story behind pets. So I'm glad to have you on, Kelly. Welcome to Heroes in Grief. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, you contacted me, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you followed up, too, because what happened was you sent me an email, and I network all the time trying to find people, you know, and discuss with people being on the show. And so I wasn't sure where your message came from. So I was looking all over for it. In fact, today or yesterday, I was looking for it, and I was like, I want to have that pet show. And so you messaged me yesterday, I think it was, again, and reminded me, and I'm glad you did. So thank you. And you came on very quick, which I appreciate that too. So
yeah, absolutely. But worked out.
Yeah, it did work out. It's great. So we got some good things to talk about tonight. Tonight where I am, where we are.
Yeah, same.
Kelly is in the Atlanta area, right? Georgia or Georgia, just Georgia in general, or Atlanta?
Atlanta area. Yep. Atlanta area.
Okay, good. All right. So Kelly, why don't you tell us how this all came about? Obviously, you've been a pet person in your life too, and everything. Was there anything particular that happened that brought you to getting involved in having, a website, the griefforeverafter.com website, which we'll have in the show notes for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But you've obviously gone full bore into this. That's a wonderful website, by the way, and there's just fantastic things on there. I love it. Lots of information for people there. So look it up, folks, because you'll find great stuff there. But why don't you tell us the story? You know, what went on and what got you all into this?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Tom. I've always had an interest in supporting people during this most vulnerable, difficult time in their life, grief and death in general, and not even particularly pet loss. So even when I was like late teenager, early 20s, I was finding myself drawn to this work, which I don't know when you're a late teenager, early 20s, really know what to do with that. So, I did the normal thing, got into the corporate world and whatever. And then I got my first dog, and she like completely changed my life, my world, the trajectory of my life and my world. And I slowly became part of like this animal world. I worked when I was younger, I worked as a groomer, and then I worked in a veterinary office for a really long time, over a decade. And during that time, again, found myself really drawn to seeing people through those really hard days. When you have to bring your dog or your cat or your pet to the vet for the last time. And it was just such a
Yeah.
profound way to be able to support people. And it just festered and grew. I was like, let me just pursue education, pursue some certifications on how to really support people in grief. And pet loss is so disenfranchised. As many people that have pets and love pets and respect pet owners and pet families, it's still a tough grief to live through. Not everyone quite understands what a long journey it is. So here I am. I have survived the loss of multiple pets. And this year, um, but we had the loss. My husband and I experienced the loss of our sixth dog. So it's the sixth time we've been grieving a dog. This one, a really special little guy. And now, as a pet loss grief coach, I knew I needed to do something in my own grief. After supporting other people throughout my work day, I needed something like an outlet for my own. And so this website was born.
Incredible. Yeah. As you're talking, I've got so many stories about the dog grief stuff and everything from my life. I'm sure we'll share some of them, but, yeah, I guess, as I was thinking about having you on, I'm thinking about people out there in the general public and everything that don't understand sometimes, the bond of a pet. Many, many do. I know that, and a lot in my circles for sure. But, you come across this sometimes where people might say to you, maybe they don't because they know what you're in, but where they might be like, oh, it's just a pet, And how do you respond to that?
Sometimes I think, especially if you are currently grieving, this goes for myself or anyone that I might be giving, whether it's advice or just a conversation to, um, like trying to justify and defend your own grief is really hard. It's almost like give yourself some grace just to say, I know that person might not get it. And so maybe I'm just going to kind of leave that conversation where it is. But if you want to spoon feed people a little bit, these are our families. We spend probably more hours in the day with them than we do most people in our lives, except maybe the people that live in the house with us. They're like a constant, steady support. You never have to worry what kind of mood they're going to be in or if they care what kind of mood you're in. It's a really, really special bond. And so they're not just pets. And when we lose them, it's not just like losing, your favorite trinket or a favorite pair of sneakers or something like that. They're family.
Yeah, I love that. Good response. And I like how you talked in the beginning too about how it's very much like those who say the wrong things when a person dies too. They hit you with the wrong thing, and it just seems so absurd to us who are in the grief work circles because it's like, oh my gosh, why did you say that, or how could you say that? And yeah, and I thought one time about pets, and I always saw them as a little glimpse of heaven because there's unconditional love there, and there's maybe no other place or very few places on this earth where we experience unconditional love. And so,
Absolutely.
there's that story of the dog coming no matter what your day has been like or how you've treated that dog. That dog meets you at the door the same way every time, unless you're abusing them or something. It's a different story. But, you know, and that's unconditional love. And we don't experience it anywhere else. And so that's why it's so special, that it's like, wow,
Yeah.
it's deeper. It's deeper than other things. Yeah.
Yeah. When you can
A
have a
long
connection
time
with
ago.
someone that they can't speak to you. Like you can have this years long connection with someone that you've never had a two-way conversation with. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's just like
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
It's very unique. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
an amazing thing. And they have personalities, and that's awesome. And so different personalities of the different pets you have. A long time ago, when my kids were younger, we lost a rabbit, and they had a rabbit, and we hadn't had dogs at all yet or anything. And I have to admit, at that time, I was a little impatient with the situation. My kids were younger. My ex-wife was very, upset and, rolled up in it and everything. And at the time I was in ministry, I was a pastor. And so they left to go see her parents or something like that. And so they left the house, and I was thinking about it because I knew that they didn't, my response was not what they needed at that time. And so I looked up, and I was actually looking in the Bible at one time and and now I believe this from other afterlife things, that pets they move on with us. They have souls. They move on with us. So I learned there, and it was a great learning experience. And I told them, I apologized, and I said, I was wrong about that, and I tried to give them some peace with that and everything else. So I was like, but, I wanted to just talk about some of the revealing things, because other people may walk that path. It's a little different as you go along the way. All my pets through my life when I was younger and everything, now I reacted differently kind of to all of them along the way. And now I'm older and more emotional about things, and that it's much deeper with pets that I have and everything. So, there's a lot of different facets of it. And I noticed that you cover a lot of those things on your website. You have a lot of good things, resources on there for people that cover a variety of things, occurrences, and ways of looking at things. Could you maybe elaborate on some of those things, and maybe the sections of the website and what you have there to offer and that type of thing? Because I found it very interesting that I didn't read every one yet, but I don't like to do that before I go on, but you have things broken down, you have resources available in different ways. And so you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the journey of grief in general, but certainly with our pets who we rely on us for all care, it starts even before we say goodbye, right? So we're uh, doing a lot of anticipatory grief, doing a lot of intense caregiving often. So that's a whole facet of grief. I've been your 24-hour caregiver for months or years, and you're my routine, my identity. My day is surrounded by everything that you need. And there's a lot of anticipatory grief in that time, but you're also balancing taking care of someone. So that can be complex and confusing. And then when grief surfaces, after you've said goodbye, it can feel like I have no purpose in life. What do I even do with any part of my day? So that's a real huge facet, a huge part of grief. Then there's things like traumatic grief. A young animal who you expect to have 14, 15, 16 years with, that dies at 3 or 4, either by an accident or, an illness that no one could have saw coming. Guilt, regardless of what kind of grief we're dealing with, there's always a lot of guilt involved. And with the amount of responsibility we have for our fur babies, our fur family, guilt tends to surface almost immediately, and is something that people contend with sometimes for, it just like revolves in your head. And I've been quoted as saying it's like an unwanted house guest that you can't evict. It just won't go away. So all of these little things, I try to write for anything I can think of, any little kind of one piece of someone's grief. To me, if they can read something that was written that was like, that is exactly me, that's my goal. That's what I'm looking to do.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I always say, the pets are a risk. Love is a
Mm.
risk, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially with a pet, because you're going to likely outlive them.
Hmm.
And so, I guess just give them as much love and love them as much as you can and enjoy the time as it's there, as it's given to
Yeah.
you. And,
Yeah.
that risk there. I thought of that with our dogs. My son passed away 19 months ago, and then we have 2 dogs left. And I'd sit there and the horror of thinking that they're going to leave, and they're not
Hmm.
going to be there someday. They're getting older, 12 and 8 or whatever. And
Yeah.
labs, they don't live that long and everything. And
Yeah.
actually both of them passed away this year. And so,
Wow.
but in the time I had, and they weren't sick really until near the end, both of them, but, just absorb all the love with them that you can.
Mm.
And it's wonderful, to, on the couch and just hugging them. And that thought comes into your head that they're going to go or whatever. And just forget that, just love them and enjoy the love while it's there,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I mean, they are their greatest support. They get us through so much in life. And it's really hard to, need your constant support that's always gotten you through everything when now you're grieving them. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, I mean,
Yeah.
pets are amazing. And it is a huge paradox. You said this, Tom, like we hope we outlive them, right? Because if we don't, who's ever going to take care of them in the same way, And so you hope that you outlive them, but at the same time, you have to outlive them. So that's just like really hard to even imagine until you get there.
Yeah. My view changed too on having to put a pet down.
Mm.
Um, when I was younger, we had to put one of our poodle down that we had for the time I was born until I was like 17, and my mom put her down. And at that time, I was in a different place, 17 years old, and
Yeah.
not thinking the way that I do now by any means. And so it really didn't affect me that hard. And then a few years ago, our dog here, Sam, he got sick, and we had to take him in to have him put down. And he was a very big dog. He was a yellow lab, and Judy and I took him out, to the place, and brought him out of the car, and they brought a gurney out, and we laid him on the gurney, and we both kind of were like, I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there. And we didn't go in. But when they were wheeling him up there, he looked back at us and he's wagging his tail. It was so
Mm.
heartbreaking. We just fell into each other's arms crying,
Yeah.
you know. But since that time, I heard somebody say that, how could you abandon them at that time? And my perspective changed. And I thought, if I have to put one of these other dogs down, the 2 that passed this year, I would go in there with them and hold them to the very end, because our whole life we're together. And then you're going to leave them alone at the very end, the most poignant time. It didn't sit right with me after that.
Yeah.
So you've probably covered that angle, those subjects and everything. Got anything
Yeah.
else to elaborate on something like that?
The decision on euthanasia is such a non-human nature thing, right? Like, hopefully we're never really
Mm-hmm.
faced with that in the lives with the people that we love. And yet here are these creatures who we love like family, and we have to make these decisions. And it really is unfathomable, being picking up the phone, making an appointment, driving somewhere, and then being with them. I mean, I think regardless of species, it is both devastatingly heartbreaking and beautiful to be with someone on their end of life walk, their literal transitional walk. Um, and I mean, sometimes it changes you. It changes who you are as a person when you see someone through those times. And when it's someone who's just been your constant companion, I think being there is a profound way to say, "We love you. We'll be okay," you know, and whisk
Yeah,
them over the rainbow bridge or whatever you imagine.
right. And I'm like, what an idiot I am. I've worked as a hospice spiritual care director. I sat there with people passing and with their families and everything. And then to not carry that through into something like that was ridiculous. And what I heard too, when someone talked about being there for them, they talked about that beautiful aspect that you just talked about. And that's something that you can't fabricate, that you can't imagine that unless you do it, unless you go through it. And it only happens at that time. So it's very, very special. And that's kind of what helped change my thinking on that too, is that they put it as so beautiful. And, not only how could you not do that, but how could you not be there with them, but also how beautiful it was. So that is awesome. That's great.
And Tom, give yourself a little bit of grace on that, because we have to experience things like that to learn for the next time, and I mean, hopefully there is a next time and we can let love back in. And again, if that's with a dog or a cat or whatever species you choose to love, again, we probably will outlive them. That's kind of like the repetitive nature of constantly loving these furry creatures.
Yeah, I think the risk of love is worth it. That's what I think.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So you deal with all different kinds of animals, naturally, and people grieve every kind of animal, right? If they become attached to it.
Yeah, definitely. Just this week, I was talking with someone who has a bird, or had a bird, and she was, I want to say, like 24, 25 years old, and horses sometimes live that long. I mean, people get connected to the ones that are there with us through thick and thin, in the quiet times or the loud times, birthdays, holidays. As the years go by, you make these bonds with these creatures.
Yeah. What's the most unique one you've ever come across, animal-wise?
I think a tortoise, and I honestly think it was a Russian tortoise. And interestingly enough, I also have a Russian tortoise who's very young. But I spoke with someone years ago now who had a Russian tortoise that was like 40, and they can live to be 80. So this Russian tortoise, they're small, was like older than her children, and that was just kind of an interesting. Just an interesting journey of 40 years of taking care of someone.
Yeah. And they can outlive you for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the tortoise,
that's wild.
definitely. Yeah.
There's a guy locally here in Western New York. They just took away his alligator. He had built he built a special room for this alligator. He had it from when it was small. And this alligator, I can't remember how big it is now. It's a huge alligator, like a Florida alligator. And he has a special room with a pond in it and everything else where he's been raising this alligator. And he's had it his whole life. Well, they finally came in and they took it away from him. And he's fighting now. Oh. He's in the midst of litigation, but they took it off to some farm somewhere, some alligator farm or whatever, somewhere. And it's all in litigation right now. Wow. But he talked on the air. I listened to a radio program with him, and he talked about the pain he was having. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, an alligator, how do you become connected like that with an alligator? But I guess from birth and that kind of thing, that you would experience the same thing as you would with any other animal. And regardless of, how other people may see it. Right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you kind of develop a language of, I understand what you need just by, maybe body language or your eyes. And then they kind of know what we need too. And, I'm sure that goes across many species.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah, very interesting.
I don't think they're probably going to give it back to him if the alligator is that big.
Yeah, it was shocking. But what he did for that alligator was shocking too, because he actually had a habitat for it. He had built a habitat for it, which was pretty astounding. It showed the dedication, of course. The animal wasn't being abused in any sense. But so what, as you've gone into this work and everything, and there's a lot of parallels with human grief, of course. But what, as you're first getting into things and you're starting to recognize some stuff about the grief work, with pet loss and things. What kind of unique things popped out for you that shocked you or surprised you or anything like that? What kind of stuff just came out of it that I went, wow, I didn't think about that, or
Yeah.
it's interesting, that type of thing.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff?
I think two of the most surprising things to me were that sometimes people, and I'm sure this does happen in human grief, like they start to feel so connected in the grief. Like that's where our connection is. Now that you're not here, the connection, the only thing that feels as strong as the love always has is this pain and this grief. And to the point where sometimes people can't see a path out of that and don't even really want to. Like this grief is where I live now. And don't really allow themselves until a certain time, and maybe like a lot of grief work, to see that you can live a full life, still have a broken heart. You can still live a full life with the love that they've left behind with you, and that they can always have meaning and offer purpose in your life, even if they're not physically here. But I think that takes a lot of work. People don't understand that grief, it feels like it's passively happening to you, right? But you really do have to play an active role in it. And you have to, obviously, no one can push you there. You got to get your own motivation to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. A lot to think about there.
The other thing is just how much, or little, I should say, that society really doesn't quite understand it. And you said before, that crosses human animal lines. People say the darndest things. And I think, I've always been really surprised. Sometimes people are wonderful supports. And sometimes people just go into that like fix it mode. I'm going to say that one liner to you that's going to make everything better. And you'll just go back to the normal you that I'm used to. Because sadness makes people uncomfortable, right? So, have you thought about getting another one? Or, well, just be grateful for the time you had together. Those kind of like platitudes that they feel like are like, this is exactly what this person needs right now. And it can really make grievers, pet parents, completely isolate. Like, I'm not going to share this pain or grief with anyone because I fear what they're going to say to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think too that, I talk about the different losses of what I've felt through my pet lives, all the pets that I've lost. And I don't think I feel like I cheated any of them, if I have a different feeling about their loss.
Right.
That I don't know. It's I think taking it in while you have them is important too, to give them all the love you can so that you don't regret anything like that. And but for instance, Jeff, my son, passing, and then the two dogs dying after the fact, and it wasn't the same year or anything. It was this year. I had a different response naturally after my son died, and it was less toward the pain stage with the dogs because of that. But I don't feel that I have cheated those dogs because of that feeling.
Right.
Every instance of grief is its own too, as everybody's grief is their own. So, it's important to think about that in yourself too, I guess, for the folks out there. If you feel a certain way or if you don't feel a certain way, it's okay. Just let it be as it is, right?
Absolutely. Everyone's journey is unique as your fingerprint, right? That's what people say. It's as unique as your fingerprint. And, even if, there's a lot of people out there that their pets are their family, right? Maybe they don't have parents, or they've never married, or, don't live with anyone, maybe never had any kids, and their pets are their sole support and their maybe only real, day-to-day companion. That's a unique aspect of grief. And it also is a testament to that, if someone else's grief that, has a family or maybe multiple dogs, it doesn't mean their grief will be less. It just means it will be different.
Yep. Yeah, I think more and more in today's society too, it seems that we have not as many family units and that type of thing. And it seems pets are probably more prevalent in people's lives that way. And that is
100%.
what they know. Yeah, that's what they know of the family life and everything. So, that's another thing for the people who don't understand or, brush it off to think about that, got to look at what it means to that person and how it means to that person.
Yeah.
So, So you've got some resources on your site too. You've got graphics that people can use and that type of thing. You've got some downloads, some PDF downloads. Is that what PDFs or just story downloads on there? What are those things on there?
Yeah, there's just some tools to work through. Like, there's a worksheet for guilt. Like, if you want to write some things down, kind of help you think about guilt versus regret. And, if you're feeling guilty about things that you didn't do, also let's write down the things that you did do, so you can see in a really clear fashion how much you meant to your pet and how much you've really done. There's a grief scavenger hunt, which, is a little bit of a paradox there, because that sounds fun, but we know grief isn't fun. But, how we can tap into our senses, or, the emotional part of things. So yeah, there is some cool stuff on there. And I've got some book recommendations, because I think, and maybe you'll agree with me, you tell me, each grief, but learning about grief is literally like learning about a new subject. It's like, even when we've grieved before, it's still like so fresh. It's not like, oh, I'm good at grief, this one's going to be fine. Every time is like a new grief. And so reading about it can make it seem more understandable. And hopefully if something is more understandable, eventually it feels more bearable.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing anybody ever say, even if the book didn't resonate with them as well as another book or something like that, it seems that everybody always gets something out of resources, looking into it. So let that happen for you too out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What if I just had you on and brought you out to speak right now? What would you want to say to people about this subject and about you and everything surrounding it?
I guess it would depend on who the audience is. If I was talking to a group of people,
no cop-outs here.
If I was speaking to a group of people who were maybe wanting to know how best to support maybe a friend or a family member, a coworker or something that is experiencing loss, that's a certain conversation. Just like any of us grievers, you just need an ear. Just want someone to be there. No advice needed, nothing like that. Bring them something, a dish, a coffee, something like that. And on the website, there is an article that is specific to, ways that you can support a griever. There's even like sample text messages or emails, or things you can say if you pop over, things you can do if you don't want to pop over and you just want to be like, I'm thinking about you. Now, if I was talking to a group of pet parents who are grieving, the conversation would obviously be different. And I think the most important thing I would want people to know is that there are outlets for support, and that people don't have to do this alone. Although grief, I think, is like you are on your island. Like, there aren't other people on this island with you. But when your island can butt up against somebody else's island, and kind of see them from your vantage point, it does feel less alone. So seek out support, whether it be a support group, or even an online Facebook support group for pet loss. Find your grief people. Those are going to be important. And your grief people might be a small circle, could be a circle of one. If you find your grief people is like that one person in your life that just gets it, then cool, you've got your grief person. But support is really important, and you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, it's very comforting just to be in the presence of those who understand in any way. And that being there, we know that through your grief needs to be witnessed, needs to be seen. And it's so important for someone just to be there. And you don't have to say anything as a support person. Your presence there, your loving presence there, comes through to that person. They know.
Yeah.
They know you're there for that reason. They know that you don't know what to say. They know all those things, but they're not looking for that either. So, so just let it be and support your friend or your loved
and
one,
check
whoever
in.
it is.
That's the other thing, and this is, I think, probably kind of universal, regardless of like what kind of loss we're talking about, is that people do stop checking in, and then it can feel like, gosh, there was a lot of support in those first 3-4 weeks, and now, no one's really asking me, or if they see me at work like with a tear rolling down my cheek, the question is, oh my God, what's wrong? And it's the same thing that's been wrong. That like nothing has changed in my world. And so I think sometimes this revolves around like people don't want to say, oh, are you thinking about like whatever, that person's pet's name is, or how are you doing with your grief for, and saying their name. Like, say their name. You're not going to be reminding them of their sadness. We know we're sad. It's there. It runs in the background all the time, right? So say their name, talk about it. I think that's what like grieving people really need.
Yeah, and share those wonderful stories, of course, that you have, and the remembrances. It means a lot.
Yeah.
It keeps them alive. That's what they want too. They don't want to lose them, and so it's there. They're still there. It's awesome. That's great. Yeah,
and I think
so
that's
many
kind
parallels.
of where the website got born out of. Like, even if you are isolating, even if you're home alone, and you're Googling like pet loss or pet loss support or something like that, and you come across this article that you're like, oh my gosh, I could have written that myself. This is exactly what I'm going through right now. Then for that moment, you don't feel alone, even though it's words on a screen. For that moment, you think, oh, someone really got it. Someone really gets this grief that I'm going through.
Right. I think we've all experienced that in some way or another, or it's like that aha moment, for that situation. That is great. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
I don't think so, but I could probably talk about grief for the next 3-4 hours if you want to do that. It's an easy thing to talk about because, I get that.
Yeah. Did you've probably had personal human losses as well, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And you see a lot of these tools being able to be used to work through that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. The year after I lost my first dog, which, was like, that was the dog that changed my life when she came into it. And she changed it when she left it physically. And nearly 1 year to the day after that, I lost my mom. And so these were like two really big losses for me in a short amount of time. And yes, there were so many parallels to grief and so many parallels to the coping. And so, I think regardless, grief is a long journey, right? It's tough. We're not experts at it. And sometimes you have to muddle through and you find some of your coping mechanisms, but that might work. And you keep those stored in your mind for maybe the next time you're grieving, but each journey is unique and individual.
Yeah. Give yourself some grace, a lot of grace. I am so happy to get this show in because there's people out there, and I just think about who's listening to the show, and there's people out there searching, who have lost their pet, and they're in a grief world, and there's some good grief circles around in grief work, and networking, but not a whole lot on pet loss. I've had one or two come across my way as I network almost every single day. I probably get my electronic business card in about 100 people's profiles every single day. And so it's like to have that little, and the same thing in the whole grief circle world, we're trying to break through the stigma of grief in society. And you're on a whole nother level with that, with pet loss, because then people are taking it to, a little different extremes sometimes. So important. And the parallels are definitely there. It's no different really. Just because it's a pet, love is love. And
that's true.
Your hurt is hurt, your grief is grief. And so, and there's really no differences there whatsoever. Yeah, it's a great topic. I love that we're getting it in here for people because there's just those out there, like you said, in what you write. That's what I want to happen with this too. Where it's
Mm.
like, oh, I needed that.
Yeah.
And that's the goal of all of us in this. What we're doing, I guess. Being grief friends for
Yeah.
them. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Yep.
excellent.
Normalizing grief. It sounds like such a strange thing. Normalizing grief. Because it's scary. Grief is scary. None of us really want to think about someday losing the ones that we love so much. So, like you said before, instead of thinking about it, we don't. But then when you
Right.
get there, it can be like, oh, wasn't really prepared for this. So, we don't have to normalize obsessing about it, but we could normalize talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. All those terms
Yeah.
are very applicable and
Yeah.
necessary, I think. So thank you for engaging in the work
Yeah.
because
Oh,
you're
it,
helping people out there, I'm sure. Do you do any personal work with people or is it just through the website and engaging
right
that
now,
way,
just
or do
through the
you
website.
work with people one on one at all? Yeah.
Right now, my writing is really where it's at for me. As I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, we lost a dog earlier this year in April, and it kind of was like, all right, I'm just going to throw all of my grief into what can I write about, and it has really given me, in a short period of time too, right? This is not even 6 months, but a lot of meaning
Oh.
and purpose behind this journey. And so right now, that's my main focus is doing this writing and just kind of being a support in that way to people.
Hmm. What was the dog's name that just passed
His
that had the impact here?
his name was Ace.
Ace.
Yeah.
And
And
your
I'll tell
mom's
you
name?
too, my mom's name was Jackie. Um,
Jackie. Okay.
yep. And I know they're all together. That's my belief, is that they're all somewhere. My mom is like, why is there so many dogs? Why did you have so many dogs in your life? Because we never could have one when I was growing up. But an interesting little piece about Ace is that he was 16 and a half when he passed away. But my husband and I
Wow.
had adopted him during COVID. So we only had him for 4.5 years, right? And
Mm.
so this was a testament to, like, grief is my life. Like, this is what I've been doing for years. I just, it's what occupies my 24/7. I've grieved 5 other dogs and a cat, and obviously my mom, my dad as well. And yet with this grief, I was shocked that, so when you have a dog that's 16 and a half, right, what do people say? Oh my gosh, he had such a great long life. But we only had him for 4 years. And so if
Mm-hmm.
someone had a dog that's 4 and he died, right, you'd go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. And so, you were robbed of time. And we don't
Yeah.
get that robbed of time thing, because obviously he lived a long life. But we only had him for 4 years. So I'm grieving the years we didn't have him when he was young.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting thing that that's something in my own grief that surprised me.
Huh. Yeah. There's it's very complex,
Mm-hmm.
the grief circles.
Yeah, and this was
Excuse me. I
my
should say
first kind of like,
swirls, not circles.
yeah, yeah. He was my first senior rescue, so I wasn't anticipating that. Like, I had not been prepared for that facet of it.
Yeah. Hmm. Great stuff, Kelly. Thank you.
Mm.
And first of all, I'm very, very sorry for your losses. And
Thank you. Likewise,
they
Tom.
don't. Thank you. It doesn't matter how long ago they are. They're there, and they're going to be present,
Mm-hmm.
like you said. It's a companion that we don't. It doesn't go away. Our companion
Right.
is there forever after that. So, Kelly Cormier is her name, folks, and her website is griefeverafter.com. And it's all for your pet loss needs and general grief needs as well. I saw some articles and just general grief and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. And being a certified grief educator, she has that background as well. So look her up, folks, please. Spread the word and get your help right there. Anything else you want to share with the people, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, just be gentle with yourself, like you said before, Tom. Self-compassion and self-kindness in grief are not easy. You got to dig for them. But you do deserve that while you're grieving, regardless of who you're grieving. You deserve some compassion, the same that you would give your loved one. And I think that's part of what can kind of help us just get through a lot of the humps of grief. And I thank you for having me on and kind of like being open to talking about this.
Absolutely. No, it's wonderful. And your compassion comes through very clearly. So I think the people are going to be able to resonate with you and connect with you on that. And that's a huge thing to happen too. So wonderful. All right. We'll get everything out there. All the information that you need will be in the show notes. Kelly has sent me some information already. We'll have the links there for you and everything else. And we're going to see you out there again soon. Thank you, Kelly.
Right.
Thanks for being on.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.